In the heart of the great valleys of the east, nestled between the hills that whispered at night and the river that roared like a wounded lion, lay the village of Umunogo. To a traveler passing through during the day, Umunogo seemed like a paradise. The yams grew as thick as a man's thigh. The palm oil was as red as sunset, and the women were as beautiful as the morning dew. But Umunogo was a village of weeping. It was a land where the sound of the flute was often replaced by the high-pitched wail of a grieving mother. For 3 generations, a dark shadow had hung over the village. It was a curse that no medicine man could cure and no priest could appease. In Umunogo, no male child ever lived to see his 11th birthday. As soon as a boy turned 10, the countdown began. Within days of his 10th birthday, he would be struck by a mysterious cold. His skin would turn as pale as wood ash, his eyes would roll back, and by the next moon, he would be buried in the forest of the young, a place where the graves were small and the grass was always wet with tears. The people of Umunogo had tried everything. They had sacrificed white bulls. They had offered 7 virgins to the river goddess. They had even invited powerful sorcerers from the distant lands of the north. But the spirits remained silent, and the boys continued to die. This was the world into which Obinna was born. Obinna was a bright-eyed boy with a laugh that could make the elders forget their sorrows. He was the only son of Adana, a widow whose husband had died of a broken heart after their first 2 sons were taken by the curse. Adana lived every day in a state of suspended breath. To her, Obinna's growth was not a blessing, but a ticking clock. As Obinna's 9th birthday passed and the months began to roll towards the dreaded 10th, Adana's desperation turned into a quiet madness. She stopped going to the market. She spent her days at the village shrine, scrubbing the floor with her own wrappers, begging the gods to take her life instead.
Look at him, great ancestors. He has the hands of a farmer and the heart of a king. Why must the earth swallow him before he can even learn to sharpen a machete?
The village king, Eze Igwe, was a man whose own palace was a graveyard. He had lost 4 sons to the curse. His crown sat heavy on a head that had no heir to inherit it. He had become a bitter man, ruling with a cold heart, for he believed the gods had turned their backs on Umunogo. Then, 7 days before Obina was to turn 10, a man arrived. He did not come with the fanfare of a great medicine man. He did not wear bells or carry a staff decorated with human skulls. He was a lean, dusty man with skin the color of parched earth. He wore a simple cloth tied over his shoulder, and on his back he carried a wooden box. The box was about the size of a nursing mother's chest, carved from a dark, heavy wood that no one in the village recognized. It had no visible lock, no hinges, and no markings, yet it seemed to hum with a low, vibrating energy that made the dogs of the village howl as he passed. The stranger walked straight to the king's palace. The guards tried to stop him, but the stranger simply looked at them. He didn't say a word, but his eyes were so deep and ancient that the guards felt their knees grow weak. They stepped aside. Eze Igwe sat on his throne, staring at a moth fluttering near an oil lamp.
Who are you? And why do you bring your heavy feet to a house of mourning?
The stranger set the wooden box on the floor. The sound it made, thud, echoed through the palace like a heartbeat.
My name is Jide. I have come to stop the weeping of Umunogo.
A bitter laugh escaped the king's throat.
Stop the weeping?
Do you see these walls? They are soaked in the blood of sacrifices. We have had the greatest healers in the land. What can a man with a wooden box do that the gods have failed to do?
Jide leaned forward.
The gods did not start this curse, Eze. A man started it, and a man must end it. But the price of the truth is often heavier than the price of a lie. Are you ready to see what is inside the box?
The king's curiosity was triggered. But before Jide could open it, Masi Okoro, the oldest man in the village and the king's chief advisor, stepped out from the shadows. Okoro was a man whose face was a map of 1,000 wrinkles. He leaned on a staff of polished bone.
Do not listen to this wanderer, Eze. He's a deceiver. He brings a cursed box into our palace to bring more misfortune. God, throw him into the evil forest.
Jide smiled, a slow, knowing smile, and said,
Why are you so afraid, Mazi Okoro? Is it the box you fear, or the memory of what happened 80 years ago under the Iroko tree?
The palace went silent. Okoro's face turned a ghostly shade of grey. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The king looked between the two men. 80 years ago? And the king said,
Jide, if you can save the boy Obinna, whose 10th birthday is but a week away, I will give you half of my cattle. But if you fail, I will bury you alive in the same forest where our sons lie.
I do not want your cattle. I only want the truth to be told when the box is opened.
For the next 6 days, Jide did something very strange. He did not perform rituals. He did not kill chickens. Instead, he took the wooden box to the center of the village square and sat beside it. He invited every boy under the age of 10 to come and touch the box. The mothers were terrified. Adana was the only one who approached. She led Obina by the hand. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird.
Will this save him?
Jide looked at Obina and
Obinna,
said,
put your ear against the wood. Tell me what you hear.
The young boy, brave despite the fear that filled the village, leaned down and pressed his ear to the dark wood. The village held its breath. Obina's eyes widened.
I hear the sound of 1,000 children laughing. And I hear a name.
What name? Adana asked, clutching her son's shoulder. Obina looked up, confused. The name is Okoro. The crowd gasped. Mazi Okoro, who was watching from the edge of the square, turned and fled toward his compound. Jide stood up.
The time has come. Tomorrow, Obinna turns 10. Tomorrow the box will be opened.
That night, the village did not sleep. A heavy mist descended on Umunogo, a mist so thick you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. Inside her hut, Adana held Obina so tightly she feared she might bruise him. Outside, the wooden box sat in the middle of the square, glowing with a faint, rhythmic light. At the stroke of midnight, the cold arrived. It started as a wind that didn't move the trees, but moved the soul. In Adana's hut, Obina began to shiver. His skin turned grey. His breathing became shallow. Adana screamed for help. Biko, help my son. I don't want to lose my son. He's all I got. The king and the elders rushed to the square. Jide was already there, standing over the wooden box. Mazi Okoro was dragged there by the king's guards. He had been caught trying to flee from the village through the back bush paths. Adana cried, carrying the limp body of Obina into the square.
Help him! He is dying! The curse is taking him!
Jide looked at Mazi Okoro. Tell them, Okoro. Tell them why the boys die. Tell them what you and your father did to ensure the yams grew while other villages starved. Okoro fell to his knees, sobbing. The truth came out like bile. 80 years ago, there was a famine. The land was dead. My father, the priest then, made a deal with a dark spirit of the underworld. The spirit promised that Umunogo would be the wealthiest land in the valley, that our crops would never fail. But in exchange, the land required the green fruit. Every male child, before they could become a man, had to have their life force returned to the soil to keep it fertile. A roar of fury went up from the villagers. The mothers whose sons had died moved toward Okoro with clawed hands. "Stop!" Jide commanded. "The blood of an old man will not save the boy. The deal was sealed in a vessel of wood, and only a child who is not afraid of the truth can break it." Jide turned to the dying Obina.
Obina, you heard the laughter in the box. That is the stolen life of your brothers and uncles. I cannot open this box. Only you can. If you have the courage to face the spirit of the famine, reach out and touch the lid.
Adana wept. "He's too weak. He is dying." But Obina, fueled by a strength that seemed to come from the very air around him, crawled towards the box. His small, trembling hand reached out. His fingers brushed the dark wood. Suddenly, the mist gathered into a terrifying shape. A towering figure, thin as a skeleton and draped in rotting vines, appeared over the box. It was the spirit of the famine, the one who had been eating the children of Umunogo for 80 years. It let out a screech that shattered the clay pots in the nearby huts. The villagers fell to the ground in terror. Even the king hid his face. But Jide stood firm. "Your time is over. The debt is paid in tears." Obina's hand pressed down on the lid. The box didn't just open, it shattered. A blinding light erupted from the wooden chest. It wasn't a light of fire, but a light of pure golden energy. Thousands of tiny glowing sparks flew out, the souls of the boys who had been taken. They swirled around the spirit of the famine like a whirlwind of stars. The spirit screamed as the golden sparks tore into its shadowy form. The cold that had gripped Obina's heart was sucked back into the light. The spirit began to shrink, turning into dry dust that was swept away by a sudden warm breeze. As the light faded, the square was silent. Obina took a deep breath. The grey color left his skin. His eyes cleared. He sat up and looked at his mother. "Mama," he said clearly, "I am hungry." The silence was broken by Adana's scream of joy. She lunged forward, gathering her son into her arms. For the first time in 80 years, a 10-year-old boy in Umunogo had survived the night. But the story was not over. The villagers turned their eyes to Maziokoro. But where the old man had been kneeling, there was nothing but a pile of ash and his bone staff. The pact was broken. And since his life had been tied to the magic that sustained the curse, he had vanished with it. The king stepped forward, his eyes wet with tears. He looked at Jide. "You have saved us. You have given us a future. Tell me, who are you? How did you know of a pact made before you were born?
Jide picked up a shard of the broken wooden box. He looked at it with a touch of sadness.
80 years ago, Jide said softly, a young man was banished from this village because he spoke out against the priest's dark pact. That man was my grandfather. He spent his life searching for a way to break the seal. He carved that box from a tree that grew on a grave of a martyr. He died before he could return, but he passed the task to my father, and my father passed it to me. You are one of us, the king whispered.
I am a son of the soil, Jide replied, but I cannot stay. A land that thrives on secrets is a land that will always be hungry. Guard your children, Eze. And remember that the wealth of a village is not measured by the size of its yams, but by the laughter of its sons.
Before the sun could rise, Jide was gone. No one saw him leave. He left behind only the shattered pieces of the wooden box. The transformation of Umunogo was immediate. The yams were no longer unnaturally large, but they were sweet and healthy. The people worked harder, for they no longer had the dark magic to sustain them, but they walked with songs in their hearts. Obina grew up to be a great man. He did not become a hunter or a warrior. He became the village's greatest storyteller. He told the tale of the stranger and the wooden box to every generation, ensuring that the people of Umunogo never forgot the price of greed. And it was said that from that day onwards, whenever a boy in Umunogo celebrated his 10th birthday, the entire village would gather, not to mourn, but to dance. They would place a small wooden box in the center of the square, kept empty and open, as a symbol that no soul would ever be trapped again. The Forest of the Young was eventually renamed. The mothers cleared the weeds and planted flowers. It became the Garden of Remembrance, a place where the living and the spirits of those lost lived in peace. And so, the curse of Umunogo was broken. Not by the blood of a sacrifice, but by the courage of a boy and the truth carried in a wooden box.
The village that once wept became the village that sang. And the name of Jide was etched into the bark of the great Iroko tree, a reminder that even the darkest night must eventually give way to the morning sun. Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to African Night Tales by Enyinna for more powerful African stories filled with suspense, deep lessons, and unforgettable twists. Until the next tale, keep your heart pure and your spirit strong.
Our stories bring us together. Rhythm of our ancestors. Tales of unity and joy.